Fixing to watch some pictures here of the involvement that I had out west. Please watch. There is the sacred site up in Land Between the Lakes. That is a construction site that they was building on Chesapeake, right in behind the shop where I was working at there at Collision Clinic. These are all pictures in behind the shop. There they are during the winter months, how they dress up their colors, their buildings. Chesapeake does. Chesapeake Oil and Gas. This is People's Church, the church that banned me from their facility because they had found out who I was that was being prejudiced against me because of me voicing my opinion about the Oklahoma bombing. They actually caused a big rumble, and I got out there and took a bunch of pictures and protested that in which what they had done to me. That was one of the officers that was involved in trying to eliminate my purpose towards me being across the road. They actually come across the road and said that I was committing some sort of a trespassing ordinances and told me to leave the property from across the road while I was viewing the people at People's Church. This is another place across the road, another officer that was basically harassing me. This was a trailer parked in a parking lot somewhere that I decided to take some pictures of this airplane. This was the group of people that I went to church with. They're are outside of Norman, Oklahoma. I actually helped them build a sound stage before I left. Playing their instruments. That guy there I got to know very well. There was the sound stage that I helped them build. Putting in the flooring, sheetrock, different wiring. This was Billy Rose's house right here. The guy that spared my records, my tools, my truck, and my trailer, during which time that the Kentucky authorities went all the way out to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, just to nab me up after that I had rented out a 3-bedroom house with a garage, fenced in backyard, pool table, the whole 9 yards. This was Billy Rose's house. I think that was his son's automobile right there. There's another good picture of my truck. It's set in behind Billy's house for a period of about 3 months, maybe 3.5 months. This was a restaurant in Oklahoma that I went to. Different cultures of their history. This, I believe, was in the Capitol. Yep, I was in the Capitol taking pictures there in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, as I got to know the lieutenant governor and other various high-ranking officials in that town, in that city. This is just part of their history, fighting battles of what went on during the Sooners, the day of the Sooners. a lot of Spanish and Mexican as well as Native American cultures. This guy right here, that the Sequoia, that they honor because of what he done out in East Tennessee up in the Appalachian Mountains towards teaching the Cherokee people their alphabet, teaching them how to read and write. Just some more history. During the day of their forming of the Sooners, this is their House of Representatives. Some beautiful art. The further out west you go, the more that you will see various artifacts. There's the Lieutenant Governor's office, during which time that I spent some time in there. They're very humble people. That's their seal that originally was like 2 counties over, that got stolen and wound up in Oklahoma. I think that happened quite frequently back during that era, whenever they was forming their legislation. That was their governor. I don't know if that's their governor today or not. I don't know if I forgot her name. More art. Oklahoma, native. Looked like that got established along about 1907. Or that's whenever that picture was taken, in 1907. Or that's what I'm gathering. I may be incorrect about that. Some more pottery, art. If one has never went to the Cowboy Museum, I don't know if I got those pictures on here or not, but if you like horses and cowboys, they have the headquarters of the Cowboy Museum out in Oklahoma, outside of Oklahoma. And if one has never been there, it was very intriguing and enlightening to go out there and see the type of history that they have, going all the way back into the cowboy and Indian Western era. Extraordinary art. Reason why that I'm going so fast is because I got 307 pictures on here that I would like to be able to display on my Facebook page, and I'm only up to 105 right now. If I see something that I really want to spend more attention to, I'll stop it. There was going down the hallways. There's seal, peace pipe, and the branches of peace. Still in the capital there in Oklahoma. There they are there in a declaration of their oil findings. Oklahoma is known now towards natural gas and oil. How the West was won. There's the 10 Commandments there on the Capitol that has caused a great deal of controversy in the past. I think it finally quieted down. The all-seeing eye. This individual right here was the individual that went up against the government pertaining to nuclear armament. He was actually examined by the federal government after he retired on 3 different occasions, and since then he has passed away, and his daughter has taken up the movement towards being an activist against against nuclear armament, and that's where I got involved up in I was going to say Albuquerque, but it's not Albuquerque. It's another city above Albuquerque, New Mexico, Santa Fe, New Mexico. That's where I got involved with a activist group of people that was trying to disarm nuclear armament. If you look this guy up, he's got a lot of history in behind his activist movement. That here is where I met up with the individual that was called upon to go out to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and do their investigation within hours after the Oklahoma occurrence took place. This is where I got a great deal of my information pertaining to the Oklahoma cover-up that had in fact occurred out in Oklahoma during the Timothy McVeigh and Nichols bad event. Once more, this is in Taos, just outside of Taos, New Mexico. I stayed in that little garage right there that had been converted over into an apartment, give or take, for about a week. That's where I got to understand the art of marijuana and the value that it has pertaining to the potential in THC pertaining to glaucoma, people having seizures, calming people down that had post-traumatic stress, the values of marijuana use that can come in different forms other than just smoking it. You can chew it, you can rub it on your skin, you can have it in a pill form. There's all kinds of different ways that you can have the benefits of the THC. These people was ahead of the curve whenever it come to investigating the values of this particular product that I'm talking about. That's just an old mountain guy there that come out of the hills of New Mexico. He was kind of like a wanderer, just wandering from one place to another. I think he had met up with this particular person that owned this property here, and he was being kind of like a groundsman. The rules and regulations are so much different out west. Whenever you're out there, they allow for you to have 4 horses per acre, and if you have anything more than that, you have to get special license to have more than 4 horses. And they would go out there and scoop the manure up every morning and throw the manure in a certain place. That way the horses didn't get hookworm. Their policies out west is very, very strong in comparison to them being very liberal here on this side of the Mississippi. Here I am camped up around, I think it was up around Angel's Nest or Eagle's Nest. They call this, what did they call it? It was a big circle during the time that I was out there that was well noted for people of taking on motorcycle rides and stuff. This is actually the most favorable part of the season, because if you look up above from there, up into the hills of the Rocky Mountains, you'll already see some snow line areas that's already developing up in there towards the peaks becoming white. I think they call it the Circle of Enchantment or something like that. This is where I'd taken on a second wind, because I had just got through coming back from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, after spending almost 9.5 months in Trigg County, Christian County jail, pertaining to what had went on in my life up in Trigg County pertaining to Judge Woodall. And I was actually contemplating towards ending my life, especially whenever I went back out to Oklahoma to help in that situation, and I realized how people were still holding my feet to the fire that had misunderstood the value towards me going out that way and doing an investigation, a personal investigation pertaining to the Oklahoma bombing. I was actually at my wit's end right here and trying to enjoy nature and get back in tune with God and etc. And this was my crossroads right here during the time that I was up there, give or take, for about 4 months. The Enchanted Circle. The beauty is just absolutely breathtaking. High cliffs, high mountains. Here I was in a little town where they supposedly had a lot of gunfights out west. Doc Holliday and I think Jesse James come up through there at one time and wound up having a shootout. In this little old town. It's the same town right here that the artist, the individual that actually manufactured the sculpture there in front of Dresden Courthouse pertaining to one of our governors. He actually lived in this little old town. I forgot the name of it. I'd have to look at the map to be for sure. I'm not going to sit here and ponder on it. Those are supposed to be graves where various outlaws got killed. This was the famous hotel where they had a lot of shootings and killings during the this particular hotel right here. Supposedly had, I forgot how many gunshots in the ceiling, where it was the original hotel where various outlaws stayed. A lot of history out west. Not as much as out east, but still a lot of history. I think this was the room here where Jesse James actually stayed overnight for 2 or 3 nights. Right there, Jesse James that passed through that area. Big longhorn steers out west. Why they grow so big? Why the horns are so big, I don't know, but it's just absolutely a different world out there in compared to over here. That is the Rio Grande River that begins up in the northern part of the Rio Grande that goes down all the way to Texas and then separates Texas from Mexico. That's the northern regions of it. Kind of like a baby Grand Canyon. I got to know some really good people up in that area. There's where I stayed at a little river where people would just come and strip off their clothes and bathe and get back in their automobile and go again. Very naturist people. That was an individual that I stayed at there, and they're in a shelter. We was listening to some music and I took a picture of him. This was the individual that done the investigation out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. There's his truck right there. He was the guy that was working for the nuclear arm guy up in let me think of it, where the laboratory is out there in north of Taos, New Mexico. This is where the guy lived, 36 Valley Street, there in Los Alamos, New Mexico. He had this old Land Rover that I found to be very intriguing. There you go, the black hole. That was the nuclear guy that had all the nuclear stuff. I guess a lot of people must have seen him as being a weirdo, but he actually had a whole lot of sense pertaining to working in the laboratory. And then, of course, whenever he retired, he turned against the government because he realized how dangerous that nuclear armament really was. There's the atoms. Here I was in another little town there in New Mexico while they was having a parade. This was winding up my trip being out there for about 4.5 months, right before I decided to head south down to Highway 10 and then shoot across the lower part of Texas and go through Louisiana. And I spent the winter down in part of Homestead, Florida, and then up towards St. Augustine, Florida. A lot of Spanish, a lot of Native American, a lot of good people that's got good soul, good heart. I believe, let me see here, this was in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, whenever I went to a powwow out there, where it was so inspirational whenever they talked about their dying race, that there was less than 50,000 true Native Americans here in the USA. Where they had meetings. This was me at a concert there in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, listening to Barry Manilow. There is Devon, I believe that's Devon Oil Company. Devon goes up and Chesapeake goes out. Chesapeake is a stronger branch than Devon Oil Company there in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and that's their Coliseum. I actually done a lot of work for Chesapeake while I was out there. A lot of work for that oil company. Worked on a lot of trucks. Big ones. 250, 350, and even some 450. Dually Fords. Huge, big stuff. Nasty work, but it pays good. There was Billy Rose's motorcycle, and I thought it was odd for him to have a plate that had 666 on it, and I took a picture of his Harley. I always think the world of Billy Rose because of him taking care of my stuff. Always be grateful. This was a guy, whenever I first come back, that I borrowed his ladder, and for some reason his wife got angry at me because I had borrowed the ladder in trying to develop a recovery shelter out here at the Windmill Ministries missions here, and she demanded for the ladder to be brought back, in which I brought the ladder back, and then about, I don't know, give or take about a week later, the same individual wound up falling off of the ladder. I don't know if it was exactly the same ladder or not, but this was Brother Green, Brother Ronald Green, who passed January the 31st, 2015. I was still working on the project out here at the time whenever Mr. Green passed away. I had the opportunity of going to the church there where Mr. Green went to, there in, let me see, it was outside of Milan, Tennessee, going towards Huntington, Tennessee, there at McLemoresville, and had an opportunity of speaking at his eulogy, in which I was honored to do so, because Brother Green was so passionate about the Bible, and I couldn't tell you the amount of times that I spent with Brother Green. Matter of fact, it was Brother Green and his 3 beautiful daughters that took on the role of going to take 168 pages of my testimony and type them back up to the point that people could understand towards me developing a book, and somehow or another that got crisscrossed up to the point that it never got achieved. And I'm sure that Sister Green, his wife, had something to do with that. But Brother Green, I met Brother Green during the time that I was living in Milan, Tennessee, with a gentleman called Orlando Smith, part of the Yahweh bunch, some of the Sabbath keepers, and that's where I learned a great deal of my Hebrew teaching through Orlando Smith and his people over in Milan, Tennessee. Brother Ronald Green. This was the body shop that I was working at the time, working for Collision Clinic. This was the new shop that they had just built, that basically Chesapeake paid for, because Chesapeake wanted the ground where the old shop was, and they done a swap out towards the ground versus the shop. The owner come out like a smoking bandit on that deal, and this was just a couple pictures that I had taken the last time that I went out west, whenever People's Church decided to show their rear ends the way that they did, simply because I was trying to help after they called me to help, and then I almost went to jail once they identified who I was. Talk about people being prejudiced. Talk about people being discriminatory against me because of my work that I done in researching what went on pertaining to the Oklahoma as well as the Mount Carmel out in Waco, Texas. Talk about people being objectionable towards me being out there. That church, People's Church, there's one of the vehicles there that I was working on. That's called the Goliath frame straightener. This was a picture here that I dedicated to one of the oldest churches in New Mexico, believed to be German descent. This particular church, this particular picture, and if the truth be known, Jesus probably looked frail and dilapidated. It's probably more of the original imagery of what Christ actually looked like during the time that Jesus was with us all, because he spent so much time fasting and so much time praying. A lot of people want imagery of Jesus to be someone nice looking with a nice combed beard and a nice braided hair and stuff. And if the truth be known, this was probably more the originality of what Jesus actually looked like than some of the other pictures that we have seen of Christ. This was the church there in New Mexico, where I dedicated the picture. And I don't know if they ever put the picture up. I don't know if they submitted it to the church and actually hung it on the walls or not. I'm assuming that they did, but I don't know for sure. There was the pastor there, or the priest. You can see the picture there on the ground where that I had dedicated it to the church. one of the oldest established churches, recognized in 1610. In the USA. I felt like that the picture deserved to be looked at in a historical form. Because if the truth be known, if that church picture of Jesus, whenever it originally come out, was probably in the 1500s over in Germany somewhere. These were some of the cave dwellers, where people lived in caves out there in New Mexico. This was a shop that I went into. Different art, pottery, all kinds of Native American stuff. They was having a renaissance at this particular area that I stopped off at to take these pictures of the cave dwellers. This was at a outdoor meeting pertaining to drugs that had taken over the heart, and they had this big poster that they was presenting to the people. This was in Taos, New Mexico. Had a wonderful time with these people. This culture of people I could truly relate to and understand. This was a bridge going over the Rio Grande River. That's way, way down there. Give or take probably about, if I was estimating, probably a 50-story building would be conservative, but possibly even as much as 75-story building, maybe even a 100-story building to the bottom of that cliff. In other words, there would be absolutely no way a human being could live if they fell off that cliff. Here I am at the church again. Santa Fe, New Mexico. There's a picture there of Jesus during his crucifixion. It looks gory, but if the truth be known, in actuality, he probably looked similar to that picture right there during the crucifixion. This was where we was raising money for the facility that I was staying at. I stayed there for almost 90 days. Santa Fe, New Mexico. We was raising money. That's how they gathered proceeds to be able to work. This was at the meeting where they was at the Renaissance out west. If you've never been to a Renaissance, it's very, very educational. All them bubbles. This country has so much history. There's my stick there that I used whenever I was going up to Washington, D.C., going up the C&O Canal, and that stick basically saved my life whenever I got stuck going through the muck at the C&O Canal, going to the opposite side. If it wasn't for that stick right there, I would have possibly lost my life. And to this day, I still carry the stick with me. Spanish, doing a Spanish dance. Here's another church that I was at, I believe in the same area, but I'm not for sure. Here's where they was displaying drug addiction, to where we use DARE over here in America to try to teach children and kids not to get on drugs. Out west, they do it in a art play type form of people being on cocaine, drugs, and that's basically what you're looking at right here is white powder. This white powder right here is cocaine, or representing cocaine, and they make a play in regard to people being messed up on drugs, and they're standing on these stilts, and it was really very educational towards how that they was displaying themselves in the degree of being wasted, and their minds being entangled, and the drugs that was causing the despair in their lives. And of course, he's the drug lord, the main kingpin of the drugs, cocaine. And now they're falling on each other towards trying to, they've taken balls and throwing them back and forth, and they're wasted, they're high, and they think that they're having a good time, but they get caught up in this web, this relentless web of drug activity, to the point that they become so stoned that they can't even stand up now. And of course, once more, the drug lord is trying to pick them back up. Come on, you want some more drugs, don't you? It was extremely, extremely educational while I was out there, involving this type of activity. At first, whenever I went out west, I had no earthly idea that I was going to be gifted towards God showing me different cultures of what they do and how they do it. And it was absolutely remarkable in seeing all the different cultures and how that people still lived out west. It was absolutely outstanding. I don't know for sure if I'm going to be able to do this or not. I'm just taking this by ear here. This was whenever I was up in, I don't know why the picture isn't bigger. There's some war paint that I had on during a ceremony up at the sacred site up at Land Between the Lakes. There's the curse that I planted onto the soil there along about 2008, 2009 up at Land Between the Lakes. Since this is so small, I'm going to dial this in on my camera and then come back and recapture it, because I know it's going to be difficult.